Week 12 of the 2020 college football season is wrapped up, and we're headed into Week 13 of this college football season. And Week 13 is going to be a crucial week for a lot of teams moving forward as we get closer and closer to the championships for the conferences coming up within 3 weeks or so now. So it's going to be a big week for a lot of these teams. And obviously you got a lot of big games last week. We saw Indiana and Ohio State play each other. Of course, this was going to be a big game for Indiana considering how well they have been off to a good start. And of course, they had a close game to Ohio State, never got the win there, but still, that was probably one of your bigger games of the week. And we also saw a big game between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Looks like Oklahoma's back, so that's going to be big for them. We're going to be able to see how far Oklahoma can get, considering they did have 2 losses at the beginning of the season, but right now it looks like Oklahoma is the best team in the Big 12 despite those 2 losses. So it's going to be an interesting last couple of weeks of this regular season. And as we always do, today I'm going to be going over my updated rankings for Week 13, and we're going to be starting out with 1 through 7. Alabama remains at number 1 this week, and they are obviously, I'd say, the most consistent team in all of college football right now. They beat Kentucky 63-3, absolutely destroyed Kentucky for that matter. They're 7-0, and I'd say they're easily the best team in the country right now. And I think Alabama, if I were to declare a winner of this college football season, it'd definitely be Alabama right now. They've been absolutely rolling through this college football season. They've blown out every opponent that they've played so far. And, of course, after having a bye week, well, of course, they didn't play LSU a couple of weeks ago, which they were scheduled to, but still, I'd say Alabama is a team that definitely should be your favorite to win the title right now. But, yeah, definitely watch out for them moving forward because who knows what can happen in 2020. We also got Notre Dame. They had a bye week this week, but they're going to be number 2. And they're, of course, they beat Clemson a couple of weeks ago, and that's the reason why Notre Dame is so high. 3 is going to be Ohio State. They beat Indiana by only a touchdown. 42-35 was the final score there, and considering Ohio State blew out all of their opponents prior to that Indiana game, that's pretty impressive that Indiana was able to hang on with them. But Ohio State still a good win in the end. They are 4-0 right now, and they're hanging on to that number 3 position. 4 is going to be Clemson. They had a bye week as well, and they are 7-1. Of course, they had their game against Florida State canceled on the day of, so that is brutal for Clemson. Of course, it looked like they're going to be moving on to 8-1 on Saturday, but that did not happen in the end because Florida State had to cancel. But Florida's going to be at number 5. They blew out Vanderbilt 38-17. And if you watch the first half of that game, that was kind of a scary one there for Florida. Vanderbilt was hanging on with Florida for a good chunk of that first half. In fact, Vanderbilt was actually leading that game a lot in the first half. And that was I'm sure that was a frightening experience for a lot of Florida fans, but they still got the win pretty comfortably. They're 6-1 now, and they beat Vanderbilt 38-17. Texas A&M comes in at number 6. They had their game postponed or canceled as well. And so, they didn't have a game last week, but they're 5-1 and sitting at number 6. And then at number 7, your new number 7 ranking is going to be BYU. They absolutely destroyed North Alabama 66-14. And the thing is about BYU right now, and a lot of people are probably going to criticize me for this because, of course, Cincinnati right now should be the 7th ranked team in the nation. But if you think about it, BYU, of course, you're going to say that they have played the Sisters of the Poor. They haven't played any good teams. And honestly, you're kind of right on that. But the thing is, though, they have absolutely destroyed every single opponent that they've played except for UTSA. And that was back in way early October. They have completely blown out all of their opponents otherwise. I'm talking by big margins, too. If you look at Navy at the beginning of the season, beat them by 50. They beat Troy by 40. They, of course, beat Boise State by nearly 50. North Alabama was no different. So, all around BYU, I think, Cincinnati is a good team, but Cincinnati had a close one to UCF, which BYU has blown out every single opponent that they've played. Plus, they've played a good Boise State team, which Boise State, let me remind you, they could be ranked this week. I would not be opposed to putting Boise State in the rankings this week, which I didn't in the end, but Boise State's definitely one of the first ones out right now for the rankings. So BYU beat a very good team there in Boise State back a couple of weeks ago. 51-17 was the final score there, in fact. So BYU, I think, right now is genuinely a top 7 team, and that is a rare thing about me to say. Usually for me, if you've been around the channel for a long time, usually I go pretty conservatively on the Group of 5 conference teams and the teams that are out of the Power 5 because their strength of schedule is so low. So that's, if you look in the past few years, like UCF, when they had that really good season, I was really conservative on them for a while. In this situation for BYU, I think they are for real. They have blown out, once again, every opponent that they've played, and I genuinely think BYU is a good team, and that takes a lot for me to say that, considering, once again, I usually favor the Power 5 teams more than the teams outside of the Power 5, just because of the strength of the schedule. But once again, if you look at BYU, they've blown out every single opponent, and that's exactly what you have to do if you want to be a good Group of 5 team that is a college football playoff contender, which BYU in this situation has done that better than Cincinnati. Cincinnati's played well as well, but they've had more close games than BYU has. And you're going to say, well, Cincinnati's in the better conference. You're correct there. But BYU, let me remind you, Zach Wilson, their quarterback, has been absolutely fantastic for that matter. And he's been playing very, very well this season. And I think BYU is a legit contender right now for the playoff. Well, actually, I don't really think they're going to be able to make it into the playoff, considering they've only got one more game left coming up on December 12th against San Diego State. So it's going to be tough for them to make it in, but I definitely think BYU is going to make it close. They could be the first, or they could be one of the first two out, is what I'm saying here. I think it's very possible that we do see that happen. But moving on to your 8 through 14, Cincinnati comes in at number 8. Of course, they had a close one to UCF. Looked like UCF was going to get the win there for a little while. And don't get me wrong, Cincinnati is a great team, and I definitely think that they are deserving of a 7 position in this situation. But let me remind you, the BYU and Cincinnati gap right now is extremely small. I could easily put Cincinnati at 7 right now, but I'm just going to go with BYU at 7 this week because they've blown out every team. Cincinnati had a close one to UCF, which UCF's a good team, but still in the end, if you're going to be a college football playoff team, you got to be blowing out all of your opponents if you're outside of the Power 5. But Cincinnati's 8-0 right now, also looking pretty good. Oregon's coming in at number 9. They move up 2 after beating UCLA. 38-35 was the final score there. Kind of a close game there against UCLA, but in the end, the Bruins haven't really looked all that terrible this season, so that's a good win, I would say. They're 3-0. Miami's coming in at number 10. They move up 3 positions during their bye week. Of course, they're 7-1 right now. Definitely looking like a great team in the ACC, and I moved them forward because I just don't think Georgia and Iowa State, for example, are worthy of having a position above Miami for now. Because, if you look at them, they're all 2-loss teams. And Miami right now is 7-1. They've got a lot of wins and only 1 loss, which their only loss is to Clemson in this situation. So for Miami, to be able to win 7 games already in a season that's been as crazy as this, it's very impressive for Miami. So they're going to be number 10 this week. Indiana, this may be a little bit of a surprise to you guys, but I'm only going to be moving Indiana down 2 this week. And it sounds crazy right now, but Indiana, they played Ohio State extremely well. Like, I was watching this team, Michael Penix, he's playing extremely well for Indiana. This Hoosier team is for real. And they were that close. Ohio State really has not had a lot of close games over the past couple of seasons. Like this season especially, Ohio State's absolutely blown out every single opponent they've played. And the one close game that they've had this season was to Indiana. The Hoosiers were coming back, and it looked like Indiana possibly was going to pull off a comeback victory. But in the end, Ohio State still got the win, but Indiana, that was a very impressive performance by Indiana there. Ohio State is a extremely top caliber team, and so for Indiana to play them that close once again was extremely impressive. Michael Penix is a great quarterback. I will say that again. Indiana's a team that I definitely think has got a lot of talent moving forward, and they're only moving down 2 this week. They're 4-1. Northwestern comes in at number 12, and honestly, you could swap Indiana and Northwestern either way. But I just decided to put Northwestern at 12. But they beat Wisconsin 17-7 here. Extremely impressive win here for Northwestern, and they are 5-0. They're moving up 10 positions this week. That is a huge jump for any team. And Northwestern, they looked really good in that game against Wisconsin. I was watching that one, and Northwestern all around, their defense was so good. It was insane. Like, if you look at Wisconsin this season, they've played extremely high-scoring games. They've put up a lot of points on a couple of their opponents up until this point. And for Northwestern to only hold them to 7 was extremely impressive in and of itself. And then for Northwestern to be able to beat them, that was a very impressive performance by the Wildcats there. And it's kind of crazy how Northwestern goes from being a Big Ten West champion in 2018 to a 3-9 team in 2019, and then right back up to probably the Big Ten West champion again in 2020. There's a very good chance now that we do see Northwestern possibly square off against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship again. Just because Northwestern, they've already beaten Iowa, they beat Wisconsin, and things are looking up for Northwestern. They probably will make it to their second Big Ten championship in the past 3 seasons. 13 is going to be Georgia. They beat Mississippi State 31-24 here. I want to say it was a great win. That was kind of an ugly win for Georgia there. Looked like Mississippi State was probably going to pull off the upset there for a little while, but Georgia still got the win. 31-24 was their final score. They're moving down 1 this week just in favor of Northwestern, who's moving up, and Georgia's 5-2 right now. Iowa State had a shutout win to Kansas State. 45-0 was the final score there. And I considered putting Oklahoma at number 14, but I could not put Oklahoma ahead of an Iowa State team that just shut out Kansas State. So Iowa State's moving up one position to 14. They beat Kansas State, and they're going to be ahead of our number 15, which is Oklahoma. The Sooners are really back on the rise right now, and they still have 2 losses, of course. You can't forget about that. But in the end, ever since they finally got over those 2 losses, this offense, I was saying this last week, this offense really clicked, or really has clicked over the past couple of weeks. Spencer Rattler's been playing very well, much better than he played at the beginning of the season. All around, Oklahoma, I definitely say, is a favorite to make it to the Big 12 championship. They do have a few things, like they don't control their entire destiny quite yet because you got Iowa State, I think, at the top of the conference right now. But I mean, yeah, those 2 losses at the beginning of the season are definitely going to haunt Oklahoma moving forward. But this Oklahoma team, I would definitely say, is the best team right now in the Big 12, but their record definitely does not show it. But Oklahoma is playing very well. This is kind of the Oklahoma that we thought we were going to see at the beginning of the season, and they definitely proved us that they're really a good team because they absolutely blew out Oklahoma State. 41-13 was the final score there. Very impressive win by Oklahoma on Saturday night. USC is coming in at number 16. They also had an impressive win over Utah. 33-17 was the final score there. And USC is looking like a pretty good team as well at 3-0. They're moving up 1. Coastal Carolina comes in at 17. They had a big win over Appalachian State, 34-23. And I wasn't quite sure if Coastal Carolina was going to get the win there because Appalachian State is sneakily a pretty good team as well. And Coastal Carolina played very well there, got the win by 11. And your final score was 34-23. So Coastal Carolina is moving up to number 17. 18 is going to be Wisconsin. They lost to Northwestern 7-17 last week. They're moving down 8 positions after that loss. Like, Wisconsin honestly was exposed in that matchup. I mean, Northwestern was a very good team. They played very, very well. But for Wisconsin, I mean, you're not going to win the Big Ten West with a performance like that. Like, of course, they blew out Illinois at the beginning of the season, which Illinois, honestly, is not looking all that terrible right now. And they got Michigan. They absolutely destroyed Michigan, which Michigan's a terrible team too. But in the end, they also blew out, they blew out 2 teams, and their average points per game coming into this matchup was 47. And they only were able to get 7 points in that game. So for Wisconsin, it was just kind of a messy week. And I'm sure, they've only got 3 games left now, so it's going to be tough for them to be able to make it back up into the top of the Big Ten West. But we'll have to see what happens there. They're definitely going to need Northwestern to lose a couple of games, which I don't think, personally for me, I don't think Northwestern's going to lose another game. Like, Northwestern's got a pretty easy schedule on their way out. They've got Michigan State coming up next week, Minnesota the week after, and Illinois the week after that. So all 3 of those games I'd say are pretty favorable towards Northwestern. So for Wisconsin, Wisconsin's going to, have to win out. They're going to have Northwestern lose 2 games because of course, Northwestern has a tiebreaker over Wisconsin, so you got to worry about that. But yeah, it should be an interesting last couple of weeks for sure out of this conference. But then we got Texas at 19. They had a bye week. They did not have a game this week. They're 5-2. Oklahoma State's coming in at 20. They lost to Oklahoma 13-41. Terrible loss for the Cowboys there. Oklahoma State at some point this season I had ranked in the top 6, and for Oklahoma State, they've been kind of on the downfall since. They just got completely destroyed and dismantled by Oklahoma there. That was a bad loss. But they're moving out in 6th this week. They're 5-2. Auburn's coming in at 21. They beat Tennessee in a decent win. 30-17 was the final score there. They're moving down 1, but they're still 5-2. So they're not having all that terrible of a season at all. Auburn, I think, still's got some good potential. They're kind of in the background of the SEC right now, but they're still a pretty good team. Don't forget about them moving forward. Moving on to our 22 through 25, we got Marshall, North Carolina, and Louisiana coming in that order. All 3 of those teams did not play games this week, but Marshall moved down 1 in favor of Northwestern, so that's why Marshall's back into the final slide here at 22. But they're 7-0. They're looking like a decent team. And the thing is about for Marshall, if you look at the AP poll, the AP poll is very high on Marshall right now. I believe Marshall's ranked, if I'm right, in the top, I think they're in the top 16 in the AP poll. Let me check. Yeah, it's top 17. They're 17th right now in the AP poll, but they were ranked 15th last week. So all around, Marshall's been ranked very high in the AP poll, but I'm not as high on Marshall. I think Marshall still needs to get a couple of good wins in order for me to really trust that they're a good team because they're 7-0, but they're in a terrible conference. They're probably in the worst conference in all of college football, and they've had a couple of significant wins, and they've blown out most of their opponents, but Marshall is just, I don't think they're worthy of being a top 20 team quite yet. But North Carolina is coming in at 23. They're 6-2, and I'd probably say North Carolina is trying to get back on the rise, but I definitely think they're still a team worthy of a lot of potential. Louisiana is coming in at 24, and they're 7-1. Of course, they're moving up one this week. They also did not play a game. And then 25 is going to be Tulsa. They beat Tulane on a last-second touchdown. 30-24 was the final score there. That was kind of a scary game there for Tulsa, but they're 5-1. Their only losses to Oklahoma State. So all around, Tulsa, I would say, is looking like a pretty good team right now. So they're moving into the rankings this week. The team that dropped out of the rankings this week is 24th ranked Liberty. So they're no longer in the rankings. Of course, they lost to NC State this week. And then your first 5 out, 26 is going to be Washington. They are barely outside of the rankings right now. Washington had a pretty good win last week over Arizona. Then you got Boise State at 27, Iowa 28, Nevada 29, and then Liberty at 30. Boise State's kind of back on the rise now, especially after their blowout loss to BYU. Iowa is on the rise as well. They're 3-2, so they're a 2-loss team, but they've blown out 3 opponents in a row. So Iowa is back on the rise. Nevada's at 29, undefeated, and Liberty's at 30 because of a close loss to NC State. That being said, that are some of my rankings for this week. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this set of rankings. Then again, thanks again for watching, guys. Show some support on this video if you enjoyed it, so slap a like on it, subscribe as well if you're not already yet, as it really helps out the channel. Then again, thanks again for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Lots of previews coming this week. I'll see you all later.